Can you see that? Sorry.
Not yet.
Oh, okay. All right. How's that now?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well,
Can you put it on speaker view? So the
is that okay?
no. So we can see the full. Like you, I don't know what the
I think it's on presenter view, isn't it?
So
Is presenter view not okay? I just put it on presenter view.
if you click that one. Oh, maybe not. Okay, well we can maybe live with this.
All right.
Yeah, we can send the slides around after, can't we? So
Yeah, I'll let you have them. So, yeah, hello everyone. My name's Abe Shivak, as mentioned, and I'm happy to be here at this Life Sciences Autumn School at the University of Essex, excuse me. So just briefly about myself. So I'm an American, I grew up in New York City, and I studied at the City University of New York and also Boston University. So I'm a biologist. I've had over 15 years of experience in basic research in protein chemistry and molecular biology. And I had the good fortune at one point to work with a Nobel Prize winner, Ada Yonath, and she got the Nobel Prize in 2009 for solving the three-dimensional structure of the ribosome. So I went over to industry, and I discovered the field of medical writing after having been in research, and I've been working in Schering, a German pharmaceutical company, and Bayer for over 20 years. And during that time, I prepared a wide range of documents, which I'll talk about more in detail, regulatory documents, for the purpose of submissions to health authorities for product licensing. So I worked in a wide range of indication areas, including neurological diseases, cardiovascular, oncology, hematology, ophthalmology, immunology, so quite a wide range of areas. And I've participated in successful marketing applications in chronic lymphocytic leukemia, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, hepatic cell carcinoma, macular degeneration, so quite a number. So I started being a freelance medical writer and consultant in 2016, and so my clients are in the pharma industry and in biotech. And my relationship with Amwar started in 1996, where I've been a member since. I've been a past president of Amwar 2017-18, and workshop leader where I teach as well. And I initiated this outreach program to speak at career events at universities and training organizations. Called the Amwar Ambassadors Program. So I just want to mention that the views and thoughts that I'm expressing here are mine alone. They don't necessarily express the official position of Amwar. Okay, so what is medical writing? Okay, so it's about communicating clinical and scientific data clearly and effectively. So it's very diverse work. And people are responsible for preparing a wide range of documents in various types of formats. And the field is roughly divided up into regulatory writing, so writing for pharmaceutical companies, and medical communication. And I'll go into some more detail about that in a minute. But basically, if you are a strong communicator and you would like to use your scientific skills and knowledge, I think this might be a career for you. So what is regulatory writing? So it's focused, as I think I'm implying, in the pharmaceutical industry and medical devices industry. And their main audiences are people who are involved in clinical trials, government regulatory authorities, as well as the lay public. So, and the object, if you're working for a pharmaceutical company, is to attain a marketing authorization and maintain it as well for new drug therapies, medical devices, and other health products. So some examples of documents that you might prepare as a medical writer doing regulatory writing are investigative medical product dossiers. This is a very technical document talking about manufacturing and control of pharmaceutical products with some clinical information. A clinical trial protocol is basically a plan, a blueprint to carry out a clinical study. I need to mention here, we're talking in regulatory writing about clinical studies, trials where drugs are given to patients or volunteers to test the efficacy and safety of a new drug treatment. Okay, so these clinical trial protocols set out how this trial is going to take place, and a patient information sheet is what a patient gets in order to know what is involved in their participation in a clinical study, what they have to do, and what's going to be done to them. An investigator's brochure. This is basically for those biomedical scientists, doctors who are in charge of units doing medical research in hospitals, and they get investigators' brochures in order to get all the background about any specific clinical treatment, any drug treatment, and the scientific background for this type of thing and about the disease. A development safety update report. This is something that is produced at intervals, and as the name implies, safety is extremely important in clinical trials, and the health authorities have to be updated at regular intervals about anything that's being found when a drug is being developed. A clinical study report. These are reports that are produced at the end of any clinical trial. They're a very comprehensive document over hundreds of pages with thousands of pages of tables and listings and figures. And this is basically for the health authorities to know all about the efficaciousness of a drug and the safety of the drug. And a common technical document. This is not one document, but again, many documents with thousands of pages of information for the health authorities to be able to judge whether a specific drug product should go on the market or not. And other things that medical writers would be involved in would be answering questions from the health authorities once they get this submission. Okay, this is a very busy slide. I'll just sort of mention a few points. So about clinical development. So you have different phases of clinical development. Okay, you have a preclinical phase, you have a clinical development phase, and you have a drug marketing phase. And all of these phases require different documents to be written at different times. So initially, you have to register a drug with the authorities and tell them what you plan to do and what you know about the drug by now. So these are documents called an investigational new drug application in the US, or an IMPD, investigational medical product dossier in the EU. So during the development phase, you have these documents that I mentioned before. So the investigator's brochure, the clinical trial protocol, the informed consent form. So these are all at the beginning stages when his clinical trial started. And during the process of development, you have to produce these DSURs, the safety updates. At the end, you need to produce a clinical study report. And dependent on the results of your clinical study, these other studies might come out of these. So it might be decided, for instance, to do a pediatric trial, so a trial in children or teenagers. And in that case, all of these documents may have to be either rewritten or updated in order to conform with the requirements for the new trial. So once enough information is collected okay, and a sponsor, a pharmaceutical company, decides they're going to go ahead and try to apply for a product licensing application, they need to prepare this submission. And this submission is what I talked about before, a common technical document. So this was what goes to the authorities in order for them to decide about approval, as well as a risk management plan. So how any potential risk of a treatment are going to be handled by the physician, by the medic. And so if the submission is successful and the authorities decide to grant a marketing application, another phase comes into play, and this is the marketing authorization and approval, the marketing and patient communication. So, and I'm going to go into that in a minute. This patient communication and this communication to the health authorities involves producing abstracts, publications, posters, and patient advice for websites for patients. And this information is basically for healthcare professionals to decide whether or not they want to prescribe a specific drug. And also during this entire period, safety information has to be collected. It's referred to as pharmacovigilance, okay? And this is going on. Monitoring of safety and maintaining a safety database is going on through the entire process of a drug development and even after it appears on the market. So that's clinical development in a nutshell for regulatory writing. So the next area I was mentioning was medical communications. Again, the main people who are consumers of this are healthcare professionals, as well as patients and their families. They also have training material for some pharmaceutical company employees. There are also websites that need documentation for pharmaceutical companies or for patient groups. There's also medical journalism. So basically, medical communications is the next step in getting the word out about any potential new treatment. There are other areas that writers might work in. That's these non-clinical areas involving reports on toxicology, so animal studies where drugs are being tested for the first time, or chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. Okay, so how a drug is manufactured and produced in large quantities, and how you control this qualitatively. There's also areas called health economics. So this is basically for reimbursement, okay, for health insurance companies to know. And the other areas, of course, are medical devices. All of these are regulated and reports have to be produced, as well as in vitro diagnostic tests. Okay, there is also opportunities and people who are good at translating. So we have people who also can translate clinical and scientific documents in different languages. So depending on your language gifts, that's also an area that you might be able to work in. So good medical writing matters. So I just had a couple of quotes here from prominent people. For instance, from the Food and Drug Administration, you have Janet Woodcock. She was a former director, and she mentioned that the FDA, provide healthcare professionals and patients with the information they need to use medication safely and avoid medical errors. And all of these efforts require excellent medical writing. And you had Melanie Carr at the EMA, European Medicines Agency, that was previously located in London, now it's in Amsterdam. There's enthusiasm over good writing and sharing of ideas across the pharmaceutical spectrum benefits patients, the health community, and the society at large. So it's a very pivotal area that medical writers are working in to produce high quality documents. And so why is medical writing important? So these high quality documents, they're critical for the health authorities to be able to judge the risks and benefits of any given clinical program. And this has implications for the cost of marketing from pharmaceutical companies, right? So documents that are well written, that are clear, that the health authorities can get the idea as soon as possible without stumbling over a lot of difficult text, will mean that a given submission will be processed more quickly. And so it's, of course, time is money, and that is certainly to be taken into consideration when writing these types of very comprehensive and technical documents. So why is medical communications important? Well, as I mentioned, so doctors and healthcare professionals need to learn about new treatments. Okay, you can have a drug on the market, but if nobody knows about it, it's like you didn't have it. So doctors who go to international conferences or who are reading peer-reviewed journals get informed about new treatments. And this information can be provided by pharmaceutical companies or, for instance, medical device companies. And they go to these big international meetings and symposia where these documents that I mentioned are presented. So papers are presented at these international conferences that medical writers quite often might be involved in preparing. There are also websites where families and support groups are looking to find out about new advances in specific treatments, and newspaper reporters are also, and news agencies are also doing the same thing. And medical writers are involved in producing these documents as well as slides. So, why is medical writing important? So what kind of skills you need? So skills, you need to be skilled at presenting complex information clearly and logically to specific audiences. So it depends, of course, if you're addressing the health authorities, if you're addressing medical professionals, if you're addressing the lay public, that will determine what type of style of writing, and you need to be able to adapt that. You need to be knowledgeable about ethical standards and regulatory guidelines, of course. You know, there are very strict guidelines, they're changing all the time. You need to keep abreast of these regulatory guidelines to know what has to be written, what has changed, what are the new requirements. And at the same time, medical writers not only are sitting in a corner writing by themselves, but they're quite often cooperating in teams. So they need to be excellent at planning and coordinating, as well as preparing, reviewing, and finalization of documents. So where do medical writers work? Well, as mentioned, the pharmaceutical sector, biotech, medical devices, medical communications agencies, so there's special agencies for these types of things. Contract research organizations, these are companies that serve the pharmaceutical industry, running studies or helping them to be reported. In journal publishing, medical translations, as I mentioned, and even in academia or charity organizations as well. So what skills do I need to be a medical writer? Well, of course, writing expertise, so good analytical skills. You need to be able to understand the science and analyze the data, and be able to interpret this data in tables, in graphs, in figures. So quite often, you know, with a background in science, you are trained in a way to interpret data. So these are transferable skills that you can use as a medical writer. The ability to present this complex information clearly to a specific audience, as I mentioned. And, you know, you need to be able to have good word processing skills and good attention to detail. So quite often you're confronted with hundreds of pages of data and figures and listings, and you need to be able to spot things in a multitude of areas, you know, finding important points in hundreds of pages, sometimes typos, sometimes mistakes, sometimes inconsistencies. And most employers will ask you to take a writing test, and how the form this writing test will take may depend on the needs of that specific company. So scientific expertise is important. A first degree in life sciences and biology, biochemistry, or physiology, or chemistry. But one of my bosses actually was a nuclear physicist from her training. So you know, I think it's the scientific perspective is particularly important in medical writing. So some employers require an MSc or a PhD, and I've known also some medics who've worked as medical writers as well. And basically, you need a good understanding of human biology, diseases, and their treatment. And you learn quite a lot by doing. So getting involved in all of these different projects, reading these documents is a necessity before you can actually do your work. So, I mean, it's a necessity of the job to be able to learn and as you get involved with different projects. Okay, and as I mentioned, some medical writers come in with a language rather than a science background. They learn the science, but they can write quite well. So document expertise. You need to know about required formats for different types of documents. As I mentioned, investigators, brochures, or protocols, they're all different, they have different requirements. Also, you need to be familiar, if you're writing publications, what are the requirements for specific journals, okay? And ethical standards is quite important to be aware of. And most employers will train you in all of these different aspects. So as I mentioned, you'll be working in interdisciplinary teams. So you might be working with medics, statisticians, operative people, logistics people, people in preparing and distributing drugs, all different areas. And therefore, you need to be able to feel comfortable communicating with these groups of people. Quite often, medical writers may take ownership of specific documents, so they would be working with people who outrank them, but at the same time are working with them effectively, leading the team in order to produce this specific document, telling them what they need. So at the same time, you need to be a team player, and you need to be well organized. Yeah, and time management skills is very important, as well as being able to plan effectively. So you're not only planning your time, you're helping to plan the time of the team and offering them suggestions for how to plan effectively. And as I mentioned, the medical writers quite often take ownership during the development of the document. So maybe one interesting question is, how much can I earn as a medical writer? Okay, so there was a salary survey in 2017. So some of these numbers might be better than they appear here. I just wanted to give you sort of an overall impression of how much people can earn. So even with people less than 2 years of experience, and freelancers, what they can possibly earn per hour. But it's quite a range there. As you see, the median here is quite high, the range of the media. So, you know, if you can be promoted up to management or leading a department, and of course, your salary increases proportionately. And one interesting thing is MWA offers a professional development program. So we teach different courses at our annual meetings. And one interesting finding of this survey was that people who completed the courses and got an MWA professional development certificate actually appeared to earn more money than those who didn't. So maybe that's a motivation to take our workshops. So some positive aspects of being a medical writer. So as I think you're getting from what I'm saying, it's a very challenging and stimulating working environment, okay? You know, there's always something new to learn. You never stop learning. It's very stimulating. So every project is different, every document is different, every team is different. So it's really very stimulating. And if you like to learn, this is a good place to be. So other positive aspects, I mentioned the payment. It's also, as I mentioned, you work in interdisciplinary teams, and this can be quite satisfying, especially if you have a successful submission where the team achieved a marketing application for a new drug. So this can be quite satisfying. And you have an opportunity to lead a group of multifunctional professionals in terms of getting the job done. Okay, and good work, of course, is recognized and rewarded. And there are no fixed pay scales. I showed you some of the variation. Okay, and also there are opportunities to travel. So quite often medical writers have to go to different meetings and different kinds. So it can be interesting if you like to travel. Not right now, of course. This can be challenging. Many people are working remotely these days. That is the trend right now. Okay, any negative aspects is worth mentioning. So it's because it's challenging. It can be quite a lot, and timelines, time pressures, tight deadlines go with the turf. There's always something new to learn, but it can be also a lot. With a short amount of time, can be challenging. Okay, and working with multifunctional professionals is not always easy. You have some difficult personalities, especially under time pressure. So dealing with difficult people and criticism goes along with that as well. And of course, travel has its difficulties as well. So that needs to be mentioned as well. And these days, of course, we have less of that problem, we have other problems. So I just want to talk a little bit about the organization that I'm representing, EMWA, European Medical Writers Association, and how this organization is working to set standards of excellence in this area. So we have around 1,200 members in 48 countries and 17 countries outside of Europe. And we are a volunteer educational and networking organization. Okay, we have a 9-member board, so it's run by its members for its members, and we've been around since 1992. We used to be a branch of the American Medical Writers Association, and we became independent in 1997. So we are non-profit, and we are committing to representing, supporting, and training medical communication professionals. So we have 2 conferences a year, one in the spring, one in the fall, and right now they are virtual conferences now, and this has presented a number of challenges, but our next conference will be from the 4th of November, and it will be virtual. So we have workshops in different areas of specialties, so specific documents like the ones I mentioned, or areas in statistics, or areas in specific areas of science that medical writers need to know about, immunology, specific areas of molecular biology or oncology. There are expert seminar sessions. There are special interest groups. There are sessions for people who are new to medical writing, so how do you get into medical writing? There's a session for that. There are a lot of networking events, and we are experimenting now with online networking as well. But at our live meetings, there are a lot of opportunities to meet and talk to people and find out about jobs, for instance. So we have online webinars. There used to be 10 per year. I think they've increased now, and they're on specific areas, on regulatory guidelines, or any practical training, or tips and tricks that medical writers would be interested in knowing about. So we have a journal that's published 4 times a year. We have 4 print versions. We also have an online archive of our journals as well. Each journal is dedicated to a special theme, and there are featured articles and special columns, like getting your foot in the door is one column where people write about their experiences, how they got a job in medical writing. And our website has a lot of resources, reference works, industry news and guidelines, software tips. There are also job listings as well as listings of freelancers and other companies. So I just want to talk about some of the initiatives. Just very basically, so this core reference initiative, which has been, it's basically an encyclopedia of how to write a clinical study report. This is this report that summarizes the results of clinical studies in detail. We have an additional challenge these days that these reports have to be posted online, And that creates some difficulties because you have to anonymize the identities of patients who are mentioned in a clinical study. So these reports have to be written in a specific way to keep to guard the identity of anybody participating in the clinical trials. That's one challenge. In any case, this core reference document is how to write a clinical study report reference work, and it's been quite useful. These special interest groups they cover different areas, and they are basically for people who are especially interested, for instance, in safety, pharmacovigilance, and regulatory public disclosure. So the difficulties and the guidelines necessary to put all of this clinical information, some of it is very confidential information, how to, and it's required to post all this information online now for everybody to be able to read and to assess themselves, whether they, for instance, want to join a clinical study, what were the results of this study, for instance. It's open to the public. And this is so there's a lot to know about this, and this regulatory public disclosure special interest group is developing new ideas and new workshops to present at our meetings. The same for medical devices, a growing area, even veterinary medical writing as well. Medical communications, as I mentioned, for instance, in respect to predatory publishing, which I'll mention in a minute. And sustainability is a very new one. So how medical writers can, in the digital world, help to work sustainably. So another initiative is a joint position statement on the role of medical writers in writing publications. So what are the ethical requirements for medical writers when writing a publication, and the responsibilities of people who work with medical writers in terms of authorship or acknowledgement, stating that medical writers are working in a highly ethical manner and are not simply ghost writers. And this has been translated into a number of languages and posted on our website. Another joint position statement is predatory journals. So what are these? These are non-peer-reviewed journals. They are online journals. They accept more or less any paper, no matter what the quality is. They hold meetings. They ask people whether they want to become reviewers themselves. The quality of these publications